Hello, my name is Alex Garcia, and for my producer podcast, I decided to pick Steven Wilson. Steven Wilson is most famously known for his work with the band Porcupine Tree, the band he started. But not as many people know that he's produced a wide variety of artists and tracks, from things such as underground electronic music all the way up to very large scale, well known remixes of King Crimson's, In the Court of the Crimson King, as well as Red and other albums too. These remixes are considered excellent by pretty much everyone across the board. Steven Wilson has been around and creating music since he was very young. He first started when he was about 10, and his first real efforts to record and create were, I think, when he was 15. And back then he was really focused into really experimental electronic music. And his utilization of it in his albums, which were essentially rock albums, became one of the most interesting things to see develop over the course of especially Porcupine Tree as a band. A band that started out very much compared to Pink Floyd and pretty much ended up most recently as just an extremely unique force in progressive rock. Talking about his production works, his solo albums honestly are the things that I'm most impressed with as far as production. He's able to bring together fantastic bands and give them an image and a direction that is absolutely unique in this time period. His first solo album, Insurgentes, was incredibly creative, but my personal favorite was his third, which recently came out. It's called The Raven That Refused to Sing. His mixture of old school techniques, old school progressive music, old school kind of jazz fusion-y vibe, and just the overall atmosphere and feeling of the album is just so beautiful, so unique and powerful. There's tracks that are exceptionally strong and thoughtful, but his other best known production work, in my opinion, is probably with the band Opeth, which he is very, very close friends with the lead singer and guitarist Michael Akerfeld. Their albums they range quite a bit. They have very death metal, growly vocals, very intense guitar work, and that's one side of the spectrum. On the other side, there's beautiful, very delicate acoustic work, especially with one of their most recent albums, Heritage, is honestly really a throwback to kind of progressive jazzy music that would be most associated with, I guess, 70s, 60s, 70s. And, Steven Wilson's hand was very heavy in the creation of that album, as well as two of the band's other most well-known albums, Deliverance and Damnation. Deliverance, which Steven Wilson produced, would go on to win akin to a Grammy in Akerfeld's home country of Sweden. So that's very impressive. On all of his albums, he's credited, I believe, as a producer, and he also works as the engineer and the mixer. And he's very selective, and he has a very interesting thought process when it comes to these things. Some of his albums they're incredible. I mean, they're incredibly unique because he has a perspective that has an old school mindset mixed with a very progressive. How can I take this and make it better and make it more unique and make it new to people? But it still has that core, especially with stuff like The Sky Moves Sideways. That record in particular is often cited as being very Pink Floyd-esque. But still, or Stupid Dream is another one that's, was probably one of his earliest commercial successes. But, these albums were considered very, very much a throwback to other times. And you can't really listen to them and say, oh, this is a rip, this is stealing, because it's not. It has this incredible authenticity to it that you cannot get when it's just, a pound for pound kind of a theft. So his work as a producer for those albums, especially his own, for Porcupine Tree and for solo works, are incredibly well produced and put together. He picked out the best musicians, gave them a fantastic direction, and to me, he had this concept in mind when he started out, and I can't imagine he is just dissatisfied because they're so fantastic. I believe in 2009, he was doing a lot of remixes for a lot of King Crimson's more famous classic records. My favorite being In the Court of the Crimson King, of course, Red, fantastic, and it stays true to the kind of vision that those albums originally had, but it elevates them and it renews them in just in a fantastic way. And you can't really do that unless you're a fan. And I think at the end of the day, that's what really matters. In interviews I've read about him, he's always cited himself as a fan of the music. He's a fan of the things that he makes because he makes them from the mindset of and in the heart of how can I take my personality, these old ideas and these new ideas and bring them all together. And when you do that, you end up with a Porcupine Tree album or a Steven Wilson album. Something beautiful, unique, familiar, new, all at the same time. And that kind of vision is something I respect just infinitely. And that's the kind of vision that in a producer I think is probably the most important, if not just the singularly most important thing. That clear vision and then the ability to act and create on it. Thank you very much for listening.